Okay, GoviEx Uranium. Looks like I've got a lot of people who recognize the name here, so I'll move through it fairly sharply. Company is completely focused in Africa, so uranium only. We have one of the largest resource bases in Africa. We turned our drill rigs off in 2013 when we'd got over 230 million pounds in the ground. We have a lot of exploration upside on our properties. The strategy is all about de-risking these and taking them through to development stage. We can do that because 2 of our permits are already fully permitted up as the mining permits, require nothing else from the governments associated. Interesting shareholder base as well with Denison, Cameco and Ivanhoe Industries as part of that. So we're only in Africa. Why do we choose Africa? Why? Because actually it's pretty pragmatic. You can get things done. Permitting in Niger took us 6 months from start to finish in the process. Canada, that's now something more like 10 years, and with the new C-69 bill, could take even longer to get that job done. So very pragmatic from that point of view. In somewhere like Niger as well, 60 to 70% of the government's exports is uranium out of that country. So they are very understanding of the uranium industry and what it takes to get projects through to development going there. Also part of OHADA, so you've got a standardized business law that affects the whole of West Africa that makes dealing with government very easy to work with. And they're very much part of a mining code that has not changed since 2006 and actually do not want to negotiate on that. They want everybody to operate with the same set of rules, which makes it very straightforward when dealing with government on law. So just a bit on the market itself. First slide is really just showing you uranium nuclear generation and where it's gone through. So you had the major ramp up, but the key message here is that nuclear generation now is back where it was pre-Fukushima, predominantly driven by Japanese restarts, some China new builds coming on. So you've got strong growth out of China coming through, really now looking at going from 4% of nuclear generation up to 20% by 2030. That is 8 reactors a year have now got to be put into construction within the China market. What you're seeing there is a benefit coming through as well as they're starting to consolidate, standardize design, reduce the cost, reduce the time build that it takes to get a reactor up and running. Interesting, last year there were 2 pieces of research done, one by the World Nuclear Association, who asked a question of themselves, which is what does it take from a nuclear point of view to ensure the Paris Agreement requirements of less than 2 degrees Celsius increase by 2050? Does nuclear have to be part of that? The answer was yes, you need an extra 1,000 gigawatts of power. There's 1,000 new reactors would have to be built. There's 450 reactors. The World Nuclear Association would say that. They support the nuclear industry. However, the United Nations Energy Council did a study involving the 16 largest energy generating countries around the world and came back with exactly the same answer. The only feasible way to achieve the targets in there was to have nuclear as part of the build-up of energy supply. What is interesting, and this one's ExxonMobil's one, BP's much the same of this, anyone who thinks carbon footprint is going to shrink is fooling themselves. Coal, oil, and gas very much still required to meet the strong demand going forward. But you have got increasing growth in all the others within renewables. Actually, renewables in Europe have actually been flatlining for a few years now. But nuclear is very much part of the play of where going forward, particularly in China and emerging and developed regions. Most of the major African countries now have an indication of wanting to go nuclear. So you've got about 3 to 4% growth going forward on nuclear energy generation. Where does that leave you on the supply side? This chart shows the blue line at Fukushima, 2016 and then last year as well. What is clear is that the impact, particularly from Canada and the Kazakhs, was a massive ramp up post-Fukushima as they brought on Cigar Lake and the Kazakhs were bringing their operations in. But importantly, both of those 2 countries are basically creating a duopoly out there and starting to try and control the price. The Kazakhs have pulled down 20% on production. MacArthur River is now shut for Cameco and will remain shut until such time as Cameco can get their contract prices back where they need them, which I believe is something around $50. At the same time, new development needs to come through. In the next 5 to 10 years, 20% of world production will close. These are projects that will reach the end of their life and need to be replaced. So there is a very substantial amount of production demand required just to meet existing projects. That's already started last week. The Niger government announced the closure or impending closure of the Cominac mine that produces about £3.5 million that's next door to ourselves, and is one of the reasons why the government is very supportive of GoviEx to get up and running. If we look at the secondary market, this is UXC. This is taken from the Kazatomprom IPO document, but even in the secondary market, you're seeing decline here as government sales reduce and underfeeding of enriched products starts to reduce as well. This, which is UXC's numbers, the equivalent of a large mine having to be put in production over the next 5 years just to meet the hold this position going forward. So you've got declining supply, you've got growing demand out there. The other factor here is that at the moment, a lot of the utilities are holding inventory. They have that inventory because they're locked into long-term contracts. The problem is those long-term contracts were cut during the last cycle. And from 2021, they come off very quickly and have to be replaced. Cameco's already made it clear they are not contracting at the current price for these long-term contracts, as they need to see a lot higher price. Cameco have got to buy 14 million pounds of uranium between now and the end of the year. They're not currently buying in the market. They do not want to be the one pushing the price. They're waiting for the utilities to come up. When it does move, they will be buying fairly aggressively. So expect a fairly sharp response to come through on the metal price when the utilities come back. So you're looking again for the utilities where 80% of everything they buy is in the contract market, 20% is in the spot. Cameco's already in the spot market. They're going to have to go somewhere else to look for it, and they'll have to contract. So we're looking forward. We believe in a very strong view for uranium going forward. We can benefit from that because we've got two projects we can bring in production. Firstly, Madawiela, then Matanga. We can do that because we're permitted. We have a very large land position. We're right next to a Reavers operation. All the infrastructure's there, roads, power, water. More importantly, a very constructive government. There's not a lot else there other than brown and camels. Current project is $360 million to build, $25 cash cost. We've already started the final feasibility study. This project works at 55 contract. We're bringing that down to 45. That's our target. We've already made some major changes to the process design to help us walk towards that number, looking at the way we bring in power. Niger as well, we've already highlighted, is debt financeable. That's one of the early things we went on to find out whether we could debt finance this project. We already have a small consortium of banks and export credit agencies willing to fit in that and provide that debt financing. Interestingly, for GoviEx, we also have a second project, also fully permitted. We consolidated a series of projects. We have 140 kilometers of strike length here. This is an 11-year mine down next to Lake Kariba. It's very easy, open pit, heap leach operation. It's lower grade than Niger, but its acid consumption is 1/10 of Niger's acid consumption. And acid consumption in Niger is 10% of our total costs. So it makes a really big difference, and Zambia produces acid from the copper belt. The all-in cost of Matanga and Madawiela is the same. The reason we go with Madawiela first, it's a lower OPEX producer. Management, we've all been in this industry a very long time, some longer than others, and been in multiple jurisdictions. I've got a strong board. Govind Friedland's the founder. David Cates is Denison Mines and UPC. Benoit Lassalle is the chairman of the Canadian African Council, known by most people across West Africa. Currently sitting with just over $2 million of cash in the account. We've got a loan being repaid to us for another $2 million. Strong shareholding structure going out there as well. I'm running out of time, so I'll come to the last slide, which is, this is the valuation gap between development companies on the left-hand side, developers on the right, producers on the left. That is the re-rate that comes through. In the last cycle, the best two performing shares were Paladin and Energy Fuels, which turned themselves into producers. The sector went up 2,000%, Energy Fuels went up 4,000%, and Paladin went 10,000%. So there is a re-rate from changing over. Lastly, in the last cycle, the biggest deals were all done in Africa, the takeout story. So targeting towards development is the way to go. That's when they got out, but also getting that development through gives you the re-rate that goes with it. Thank you very much.